He said it at my father's funeral. Not privately, not in the careful, measured way of someone delivering a difficult truth to a person they love. In front of 43 people, aunts, cousins, neighbors, my father's colleagues who had driven hours to be there, people who had known our family for decades and who were now standing in a reception hall holding small plates of food and witnessing something they had not come to witness. Everything she told Dad about her service was a lie, Marcus said. She exaggerated. She manipulated him, and he believed her because she was his daughter and he trusted her. That's on her. 43 people. The room went quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. The kind of quiet that is not peaceful but suspended. Everyone waiting to see what happens next. Nobody sure what the right response is. The air heavy with the particular discomfort of witnesses to something they did not choose to witness. I stood across the room from my brother. I was still holding my father's eulogy. The paper, folded, slightly creased from being held too tightly during the service, was in my left hand. My right hand was at my side. I did not speak. Not because I had nothing to say. Because what I had to say required something that reception hall, on that day, was not the right place for. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Diana Hayes. I had served in the United States Army for 16 years. I had 2 deployments, a service record that I had built with the particular consistency of someone who understands that what you build in the field is what you carry everywhere else, and a relationship with my father that had been across those 16 years of service, across the distance and the deployments and the particular difficulty of a military career that takes you away from the people you love, the most important relationship of my life. My father had been proud of me, not in the performative way of someone who says the right things for the right audience, in the genuine, quiet, specific way of someone who has been paying attention, who had read every letter I sent, who had kept a folder, I found it after his passing, in his desk, worn at the edges, containing every commendation, every promotion notice, every official document that had arrived over 16 years with my name, and my rank and the record of what I had done. Marcus had not served. That is not a criticism. Service is not the only path, and the people who choose other paths build real and valuable lives. But Marcus had not served, and he had spent 16 years. I understood this more clearly as I stood in that reception hall with 43 witnesses, constructing a version of my service that was smaller than it was, that fit more comfortably inside a narrative in which he was not the one who had stayed while I was the one who had gone. He had said it out loud once before, not publicly, privately, in a conversation 3 years earlier that I had addressed directly and believed was resolved. It had not been resolved. It had been building, and it had arrived finally at my father's funeral, in front of 43 people. I looked at my brother across that quiet room. I folded the eulogy paper and put it in my pocket. And I made a decision, not today, but soon. The record would speak. I just needed to give it the right room to speak in. The days after my father's funeral were the particular kind of difficult that grief produces when grief is not the only thing you are carrying. I handled the practical things, the estate, the paperwork, the particular administrative weight of a death that falls to whoever is most organized and most present. I was both. I made the calls. I filed the documents. I coordinated with the attorney who had managed my father's affairs. Marcus was present for some of this, not all of it. He had a life, a career, a family, obligations that were real and that I did not hold against him. But the imbalance of who was doing what was visible, and it sat alongside everything else in the particular way of things that are true and that you are choosing, for the moment, not to address directly. What I was addressing quietly, in the hours between the practical tasks, was the reception hall. The 43 people, the particular public nature of what Marcus had said and what it would now mean. For those 43 people's understanding of my father's pride, my service, the relationship between a father and a daughter that had been built over 16 years of letters and folders kept in desks. I called my oldest friend, a woman named Grace, who had known me since before I enlisted, who had watched the entire arc of my career, from the outside with the particular, clear-eyed view of someone who loves you but has no stake in any particular version of the story. I told her what Marcus had said. She was quiet for a moment. "What exactly is he claiming you lied about?" she said. "My record," I said. "My role. What I actually did versus what I told my father I did." "Do people know your actual record?" she said. "My father knew," I said. "He kept every document. And the record exists. In the military system, in my service file, in documents that are not mine to have created and not mine to have edited. Then the record can speak," Grace said. "Yes," I said. "It can." What followed was 3 weeks of the most careful, deliberate work I had done outside of operational contexts. Not because demonstrating the truth of my service record was complicated. It was not complicated. The record was the record, documented by institutions that had no stake in the family dynamics of a reception hall in a small city, but because I understood that how the truth arrived mattered as much as the truth itself. I did not want to simply correct Marcus. I wanted the 43 people who had been in that room to understand what the correction meant. I contacted my public affairs officer, a connection I had maintained from my last posting, someone who understood military records and the process by which they could be formally verified and communicated. I contacted 3 of my father's closest friends, men who had known him for 30 years, who had been in that reception hall, who had called me in the days since. The funeral with the particular careful tone of people who had heard something and were not sure what to do with it. I told them I had something to share, that I wanted to do it properly, that I was asking for their time and their patience. They gave both, and I contacted Marcus, not to confront, or not only to confront, but to give him the opportunity that I believed, despite everything, he deserved, to be in the room when the record spoke, to hear it alongside the people he had spoken to have the chance to respond in a context where the documentation was present and the conversation could be honest. He came. I think he came because he was certain of his version, the particular certainty of someone who has been telling a story for long enough that they have come to believe it is true. He sat across the table from me and 3 of my father's friends and a public affairs officer who had brought documentation, and the record spoke. The documentation was not dramatic. I want to be clear about that, because documentation rarely is. It does not announce itself. It does not perform. It simply exists, in the particular plane, official language of military records, commendations, promotion orders, deployment citations, the accumulated paper trail of 16 years of service conducted, under the observation of institutions that have no reason to embellish. My public affairs officer walked through it. Deployment 1. What I had told my father and what the record showed. They matched. Not because I had calibrated my stories carefully to match what could be verified, but because what I had told my father was the truth, and the truth and the record are the same thing when you have not been lying. Deployment 2, the same. The commendations were documented, dated, signed by commanding officers, whose names were on official letterhead and whose positions could be verified by anyone in the room with a phone in 30 seconds. The promotion to lieutenant colonel, the timeline, the basis, the particular process that military promotions follow, and that produces documentation at every stage. 16 years, laid out on a table, in the presence of 3 men who had known my father for 30 years, and who were reading, for the first time, the specific content of the folder he had kept worn at the edges in his desk. Marcus was quiet through most of it, not the quiet of someone processing unexpected information. I had watched that kind of quiet before, and I knew what it looked like. The quiet of someone who has been certain of a version and is now sitting in a room where the version is being measured against, something that does not bend. At one point he said, "I never said she didn't serve. I said she exaggerated." My public affairs officer looked at him. "What specifically did she exaggerate?" he said. Marcus was quiet. "The record is what it is," my public affairs officer said. "If there's a specific claim that doesn't match the documentation, I'm happy to address it." There was no specific claim. There had never been a specific claim. I understood that now. In a way I had only partially understood before. Marcus had not been correcting inaccuracies. He had been constructing a feeling, the general feeling that something was overstated. Something was not quite right. Something about his sister's stories was not to be entirely trusted. The feeling, in the absence of documentation, had been enough. In the presence of documentation, it was nothing. My father's oldest friend, a man named Gerald, who had known our family since before Marcus and I were born, looked at the record for a long time after the presentation was finished. Then he looked at Marcus. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The drive home from that meeting was quiet. I had expected to feel something larger. Relief, or vindication, or the particular complicated satisfaction of someone who has been doubted and has been proven right. What I felt instead was something simpler. Tired. Not the bad kind of tired. The kind that comes after something important has been finished. After something that needed to be done has been done completely. Marcus called me 2 days later. The call was short. He said things. Not a full apology. Not the kind that names what was done and takes complete responsibility. But something. The beginning of something that was not the reception hall. I accepted it for what it was. Not more, not less. My father's folder is in my desk now. I took it from his house after the estate was settled, the worn at the edges. Folder with 16 years of commendations and promotion, orders and the particular evidence of a father who had been paying attention. I have not opened it since I brought it home. I do not need to. I know what is in it. And so now does everyone who needs to know. Here's what a reception hall and 43 witnesses and a table of documentation taught me. The people who call you a liar are counting on the truth being unavailable. They are counting on your record, being something you carry in your memory, rather than something that exists in documents. They are counting on the feeling they create, being more powerful than the facts they cannot produce. Keep the record. Document the truth. And when the moment comes, not in anger, not in the reception hall at your father's funeral, but in the right room at the right time, with the right people present, let it speak. My brother called me a liar. The military record told the truth. And in a room with a table and documentation and 3 men who had known my father for 30 years, the truth was louder than anything Marcus had said in that reception hall. 43 witnesses. One record, the record won.